You're listening to the Untitled Car Show in partnership with RightFootDown.com. Visit RightFootDown for your daily automotive fix. If you enjoyed today's program, please tell a friend. It's the best way to support this show. If you want to visit the archives, go to YouTube and search for Untitled Car Show. That'll bring you to the archived episodes. If you want to follow the show, just search for Untitled Car Show on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can always send an email to the show at untitledcarshow@rightfootdown.com. We're so glad you decided to spend the next hour or so with us. Without further ado, let's get into today's program. Thank you for joining us this evening, or whatever time it is there when you're listening on the Untitled Car Show. We have Matt Covert. He is the guy in charge over at RacersHQ.com. It's a podcast and it's a online magazine. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So first and foremost, let's kind of get into Racers HQ is an online print. I guess online print magazine is a bit of an oxymoron there, but it's an online magazine for aspiring race car drivers. Is that a fair assessment?
That sounds perfect to me.
So it's kind of different than your run-of-the-mill magazine. It's not a publication for someone who's interested in following, what's going on in NASCAR, what's happening in Formula One. It's more along the lines of like the free issue, where if you go and download the app, you can read today. With Patrick Sandell, it's kind of tips and tricks as to how to get into racing and kind of how to progress further into racing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The great thing about Racers HQ magazine is that it's not a car magazine. It's a driver's magazine. So rather than following a sport or a particular person or anything like that, it follows the best advice that you can get from racing drivers. And that's the whole point. I'm always interviewing and extracting the best career strategies and driving tips from the world's best drivers and passing them on to other amateur drivers.
And it started a little over from the research I was able to do. So it started maybe about 18 months ago when you started doing this thing? Or
Yes, that's right. First we started with the website, which is racershq.com, and that was part of the whole strategy, was to just build that website and give away the best free content we could for a year before we started doing any type of monetizing. So the podcast kind of came out about halfway, and then once we hit the year mark, started planning to launch the magazine. So,
yeah, and it's fair. Like I said, you can go online, you can get the article or the first issue for free, and it's fairly reasonably priced. Beyond that, it's from $4.99 an issue to $2.99 an issue, which, like, from this aspect of stuff you need to go racing, especially if you're looking to get into this industry, is remarkably cheap. I don't know, like, kind of one of the main questions I had when I was kind of reading this is, do you picture this kind of as a magazine, more for parents trying to get their kids into this, or maybe someone who's younger trying to get into this, or is this someone who's 20-something, 30-something, who's doing the autocrossing and looking to advance? Like, kind of, what's your target demographic with the magazine?
Well, the cool thing is that a lot of the people I get to talk to, have been pro racing drivers for years, and some of them over 20 years. So, and a lot of them came from nothing. So they're giving you great advice about low budget racing and strategies to get in, all the way up through the big dog stuff. Like, I interviewed David Higgins a few weeks ago, and he drives a $500,000 rally car for Subaru Rally Team USA. Well, he started, basic kart racing and a factory, Peugeot 206 back in the early 90s. And, this guy in particular, he just has so much insight about all the different stages you could go through in racing. And so you see a lot of that kind of thing in the magazine. So I really think it's for everybody. It's loaded with tactical driving information and the behind-the-scenes stuff. So business and networking and marketing and career strategies, what to avoid, how to build your personal brand, how to dominate social media, how to get noticed in racing, the whole total package that it takes to be successful in that career. So, yeah, I guess for a parent-child team, the kid can use the magazine to focus on the racing, and the parent can use the magazine to focus on the business stuff. If you're by yourself, that's no big deal. You can learn everything you need to do and do it all by yourself. I have a lot of people that reach out to me, and I love that. If you're listening to this and you want to chat about racing or what's going on with your car, do it. My email is matt@racershq.com, and I love meeting new people. And I have people who email me who are 10 years old, 40 years old. They're using the magazine. They're just learning everything they can.
It seems like a phenomenal resource, and it seems so well written. I'm curious as to what your background is getting into doing this. Like, what were you doing before you decided to start writing the magazine, doing the website?
Yeah, I was actually in film and television as a professional stunt driver. That's how I got into the performance driving scene. And along with that, I did a lot of other film. I was never a Hollywood A-lister, so I did a lot of independent stuff, a lot of local stuff here in the Northeast. And, a lot of it was, fight choreography and being like the the nondescript baddie in a fight scene or whatever, stuff that's all in that film category. But I'll always love the stunt driving stuff. I've been to a couple formal schools for stunt driving. I went to the first one, cut a demo reel, passed it around, got my first job on the History Channel, and I just slowly started transitioning into racing and autocross and SEC rallycross. I'm really big into sim racing, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. Things are going well enough, in my brand so that I'm kind of planning a couple years in ahead. Maybe a campaign in 206 karting or the Rally America series in B-Spec. So I don't know where we're gonna go next.
No more stunt driving, though?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It actually kind of dried up here in the Northeast because a couple big stunt driving schools moved into town around here, and they started pumping out graduates. So the market became flooded, and that was probably the best thing that could ever happen to me because it forced me to step back and say, oh, I need to do something different. And that's when I decided to build the website, and I just wanted the website that I wish had always existed throughout the early part of my career, and that's how it all got started.
Yeah. It is one of those niche products that really needed to exist for a long time. It's so curious to me because I've had people on from the SCCA before, NASA. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I had NASA people on, and it's they have wonderful resources for the driver at the meet, at the for the car maybe, or maybe like an aspect. Like they have a couple of print magazines, but there was never really a resource to, turn what, because from their aspect, the better prepared people are for driving, the more people get into it, and the higher people, if someone can go through SCCA and make it into a professional race car racing series, like NASCAR or Formula One or something, that's great publicity for them, and it's good for the driver as well. And like on your most recent podcast episodes, you were even talking about how, which may not be the most recent one when you're hearing this, but you're talking about how seat time really doesn't make as big a difference as a lot of people like to pretend it does. It's a lot of practicing and learning off the track, and working on the detail and the minutia kind of to get there. So it's curious to me that you have these big racing organizers who spend so much time and so much effort in getting people to them that they don't provide them a resource like you have, and this has kind of been that missing, keystone all along for people who want to take this from a hobby to something a little bit, more serious. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I mean I could count 6 or 7 pro drivers that I've connected with who used autocross as kind of a launch pad for the rest of their career. I mean, people are some like track drivers and club drivers. Some of them like to hate on the autocrossers because it's not real racing. Well, jokes on them. A lot of pro drivers use it to start their careers. But the thing about going and starting autocross, the SCCA is great, NASA is great, but like showing up and getting in the car is like putting the pizza toppings on first. You have to understand what you're doing. You need to understand the nuances of the car You need to get the physics and the vehicle dynamics and all the boring technical stuff that's going to make you fast on a subconscious level. So reading the magazine and getting these tips from the pro drivers, that's the kind of thing that's going to be in your head so your instincts can use them once you get to the track. And once you start going to the track, then you start using career strategies and marketing and networking. So the SCCA is doing a beautiful job getting people in the seat. But like you mentioned earlier, and I just read this great study on, I think it was podcast 30 on the Racers HQ podcast. Seat time is great, but if you just go and get in the seat for the sake of driving, you're never going to progress. Guys who have 15 years of experience are often slower than guys who have 2 to 4 years of experience. Well, what's the difference? What are they doing differently? So the things that the younger drivers who are faster are doing is they're reading the books and they're learning from other professionals. The guy with 15 years, he doesn't really have 15 years of experience. He has 1 year of experience 15 times, and that's not how you get fast.
That's a fascinating way to put it, because being friends with a couple of ex-racers, and you talk to them, and they say, once you're once you stop doing it, you lose the ability to keep driving fast. And I'm listening to the show, or reading the magazine. It kind of put in perspective of there's so much going on while you're sitting in that seat and driving that you do on a subconscious level, that if you just understood it at a more conscious level, like Apex on, and how to get yourself faster and understanding tire wear and dynamics, that I think if you understand it on a more fundamental level than at the subconscious level, I think you'd be able to keep in the sport longer between breaks, as opposed to, like you said, the autocrossers or the amateur racers who get out there, they race a season, and then they put away the books, they put away the car, and they don't read anything, they don't do any more research, and then they wait till next season. They're basically just starting over every year.
That's exactly right. There's no progression away from the track. And I'll tell you what, one of the things I found most surprising from all these interviews and networking I've done, most pro drivers will tell you that if you want to be successful in racing, it's only 2% driving. The other 98% is the stuff you do away from the track to build your instincts. That's why I love sim racing so much. I love iRacing and Dirt Rally or Project Cars or whatever your thing is, okay? But the more time you spend in the sim, the more you're building that, action, reaction, action sequence, and the more it's going into your head, and the more your instincts can tap into that on the fly so you don't have to think about it.
I love the sim racing stuff, but it's one of those things where it's like a double-edged sword with me, where the wife would kill me if I really got full-time into the racing thing. And then I think if it trying to get between video games and racing, it's just there's no time. So I unfortunately will not be doing too great on the track, but I really want. I don't know. My daughter's already obsessed with cars, and she knows car, truck, and she knows Ford, which I think is hilarious. So, well, that's a car and that's a truck, but that's a Ford, so we know that's going on. So. It's interesting to me to think about, this next generation coming up, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, where you do have these, kids getting into sim racing before they're getting into even a go-kart, where they're able to kind of, if you're a kid and you're interested in doing this, back in the day, your, Aaron Senna's, their dads had, go-kart tracks around their house, and, the best race car drivers were karting people, and it's because their parents owned karting facilities. But now everyone has access to, even a very base PC can run a very fundamental racing sim, and you can get that, practice time that you desperately need to understand how to drive. And I'm curious, do you think we're in for a renaissance with what's coming out, in the next generation, or do you think it's maybe you need that to reach that apex level, you need that extra little bit of seat time that these kids aren't getting?
Oh, wow. We could talk about this all day. So, first of all, I mean, you mentioned that, having access to, a kart track or something like that used to be how people became very, very good, and that's probably true. But I think that's definitely going away if it hasn't already gone away. I mean, sim racing, iRacing in particular, is on the cutting edge. Racing teams are using it, to test different tuning settings in the simulator, and 99.9% of the time they translate perfectly to the real world. What am I trying to say?
Real world. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Well, I recently interviewed Glenn McGee, who is a factory driver for Mazda in the MX-5 Battery Tender Cup, a national Mazda series, and this is the first kid who's been recruited right out of iRacing into a factory ride, which is amazing. And he said that the transition from the sim, he's just driving the MX-5 in the sim, to the MX-5 they put him in real life, he said the transition was almost seamless. And he'd never done any driving before. So it's incredibly accurate. It's getting very, 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 very close. So that's really exciting. So, and you're right, pretty much anyone has access to a PC now. So that's becoming very, very accessible. As far as the future goes, I think that there'll be more and more resources like Racers HQ Magazine, because like you said earlier, there's no physical print copy. It's all digital. So you can get the magazine on the App Store or the Google Play Store. And, I mean, the app is free. And everyone has a smartphone now, so it's pretty much wherever you go, it's in your pocket, which is awesome. So I think we're going to see a lot more digital resources. Like I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm just presenting the same old information that's in all these beautiful books by Ross Bentley and Carol Smith and Henry Watts and Niki Lauda, but nobody wants to put their face in a page anymore, black ink on white paper. That's just not the world we live in. It's going to be all digital. And I think that's going to play out well because, I've been reading some studies recently where I think it's upwards of 30% of everyone who's autocrossing and at the, track days, they're only in 2 to 4 years into their racing career, So I think that as the 10 to 15-year guys start to kind of, put it down and go away, I think that we're definitely going to be going strong for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. I'm very curious, too, about, like, you think about the professional drivers now, they're probably going to be, like, when we refresh going into this next cycle, maybe it won't be the next 5 years, but it might be the next 10 years or 15 years, where all the top-level people racing are going to be people who were growing up on sim racing. I wonder, because they're growing up with such a different level of expectations of what a car can do, because you think about the technology's improved, and you think about, like, the training and the sim racing's all improved, where, you could go to, like, before, if it's your first year racing and you got drafted by a big team and they were going to take you out to, I don't know, let's say Le Mans in this example, there was no way you were going to get seat time at Le Mans before that, first outing, whereas now you can spend time in Memorial if you want to, years in advance, racing on Le Mans, and you can understand every fundamental line and aspect of it. And I just wonder, do you think we're going to be coming up to a whole bunch of track records being broken? Do you think it's going to be, everyone's going to be so good, the whole pack is going to have to be slowed down by regulation? I don't know. I'm just throwing some hypotheticals at you because I feel like this is a good time to do that.
Sure, no problem. Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much every racer I talk to now, like I said, is using sim racing. So we're talking about, even the Formula One guys. Like I said, I was talking to David, and he was just at a place called iZone in Silverstone in the UK, and this is just a huge sim racing facility, and that's all they do there. So a lot of Formula One guys go there when they can't get into a kart. And they love karting because it just keeps them fresh. It's good, but when you can't get to the track, they go right to the sim, right? Which is pretty cool. And, I talked to, Henry Morse in the PWC, and Tom O'Gorman just won the TCB class in the Pirelli World Challenge. These guys, this is what they do. They all go sim racing. There are companies starting up now that are building software that work alongside these sim racing programs, and you get virtual data packs. And if you want, someone will show up, like we're doing here. You and I are talking over the internet via Skype. Someone will work with you, from a virtual or for a different another location, and they'll coach you and they'll say, look, these are the lines you're using. This is what you can do differently. Here's another data pack we can overlay with a faster driver so you can see where you can make improvements. So I definitely think coaching is going there. And I definitely think it's important to notice that all the pro drivers are already using it. And that's very indicative that the next generation is we're going to rely heavily on this sim racing and digital phase. So as far as records being broken, I think that will always continue happening. Everyone always thinks they're on the cutting edge of technology, and that might be true. But 2 years from now, everything's going to change, And you really have to understand how those changes work to stay ahead of the curve. David Higgins has been racing since the late 80s, and it was so interesting talking to him because he has so much experience. And every time a new car comes out or a new development happens or the engineers figure out something new, you have to change your driving style, because to maximize that new machine, you have to totally change the way you pilot that machine. And it's totally fascinating thinking about stuff like that. But getting into sim racing is going to let you drive a lot of different cars and see a lot of different advances, through the different series, and it's really going to balance you out for what's coming next in your career.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't know. I'm curious about this too, where, I don't know. I feel like we're reaching a tipping point in the way the racing's coming up, where I don't know about you, but maybe this is again just because my daughter is so fascinated with cars, but I feel like young boys aren't as interested in racing and in cars as they once were, and I feel like there's a lot of young girls who are picking up that slack. I don't know, with you going around and you doing all your research and going to all these places, have you seen a bigger presence of women in the sport? And do you think it's going to be female dominated maybe within the next 10 or 15 years?
Oh, that's a great question. It's tough to say. I haven't been in racing, more than probably 5 years, so it's tough to say. I can definitely say that there are a lot of girls out there autocrossing now, and I hope that increases in the future. I think that'd be really good for the sport. We see people like Danica Patrick. She has one of the biggest followings ever in the history of racing. And it's because she's different, it's because she's a woman, and she's using that to her advantage, which I think is absolutely brilliant. So if you are considering getting into the sport and you're a woman, you're a girl, this is the time to do it, because once more and more come in, having that uniqueness isn't going to mean as much anymore. So, and as far as young people being less interested in the sport, I think that we definitely live in an entitlement society. So for someone to notice a really cool fast car that you want to go look at or check out, you really just have to stop looking at your phone, and it seems like everyone's buried in their phones these days.
Yeah, it's weird to me. I don't know what the age difference is here. I'm 30, and I got a couple nieces, nephews, and all that, and talking to these people, and I have I have a niece and a nephew who are around driving age, and the nephew could care less about driving. The niece day one got her driver's license, likes the sport. She likes the aspect of driving. I think it's more of a freedom thing with her. But then there's more nephews, and they don't give a crap, and a lot of their friends don't give a crap, and it's just fascinating to me. And then a lot of the younger girls I'm seeing, they understand cars more. I don't know, it's weird. Maybe that's just my little isolated subset. So
yeah. Well, that's really interesting, and I hope that's true. Like I said, I think that would be really good for the sport of motocross to get more women involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about you and getting in racing. So you've been involved with racing for 5 years, you said?
Yeah, on and off, something like that, yeah.
So let's kind of bring this back to the beginning then and get your background. So when did you start, are you, would you say you're a car guy or just a racing guy or both?
Oh, absolutely. I'm absolutely a car guy. I love everything about cars. I do my own work on everything. I build motors. I do whatever, and that kind of all started. My brother brought home this huge redneck pickup one time, and I remember because there's so much room under it because it was so jacked up. And I remember laying under it and just look at everything. And I was like, I really want to know what all these things do. And so it kind of snowballed in that direction, stemming from there. And my interest in driving specifically started, watching the original Dukes of Hazzard TV show. I mean, that I think anyone who watched that show wanted to be a driver of some kind. So one of the coolest things that's happened to me in stunts is I actually got to work with Steve Buckley in the Northwest, and he was one of the original drivers on the Dukes of Hazzard TV show.
That is pretty awesome. Was that what you were doing, the stunt driving?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's friend of the show, Kibby might be interested in that. He's a big Dukes of Hazzard fan. Yeah, hence the Kibby and Finnegan show they got. That's awesome. So he brought home this crappy truck. Then you want to know what everything was going on. Like, how old were you roughly when this was going on?
I'd probably say I was probably somewhere between 8 and 10. I think maybe a little older than that, but it definitely sticks with you. And I've gone on to have some pretty great cars, and I've wrenched on pretty much everything that I've had, and I've done a little bit of everything. So I still like to do that, but I'm just so busy now with the the magazine and everything. I'm more than happy to pay someone else to do that stuff now.
Well, give us a little rundown of the cars you've owned here.
Sure. All right. My first one was a 1988 Fox Body Mustang, and it was like 18 shades of red. It was in terrible shape. It was a 4-cylinder car, but it was a 5-speed, and I loved it. It was a great car, very, very cool car, and had that for quite some time. Ended up getting into a 1978 Pontiac Grand Prix, which was a beautiful, big old car. It looked just like, a Monte Carlo. It was the corporate sister to the Monte Carlo. And being a 1978 model, it had one of the worst gas, the gas crisis motor. It was a 301 Pontiac. And I think it was the second worst horsepower to compression ratio motor in history. So it was a total pig, but it had a great bench seat, had a really great transmission, and had an exhaust note to die for, even though it was very slow. So that was a really cool car, and I hung on to that one until I got back from my first stunt driving school in Wall, New Jersey, and I saved all summer long, and I bought a different 1988 Mustang GT Cobra clone. Had a fresh motor. It was straight from Florida. The thing would spin tire in fourth gear. It was insane. So I used that car to make a demo, which I passed around, got my first stunt driving gig that way. So after that, I'm ashamed to say I had a string of relatively boring cars until I ended up in a 2014 Mustang GT Track Pack, more stunt driving stuff, and then more recently a Subaru BRZ, which I actually just sold today. So there you have it.
Yeah. What is replacing the BRZ? Now I have to know.
Yeah, I love the BRZ. I actually autocrossed it all last year. I managed to win an autocross championship here in the Northeast. What a great car, very underrated car. I was talking to James Rimmer, who's one of the Red Bull Global Rallycross Lights driver, and he's actually one of the first people to go stage rally racing in a prepped BRZ. So that car is super versatile. I know the BRZ also won the runoff series in I think it was T4. So it's pretty much good at everything, and I'm really excited. They're definitely keeping it around. I know there's an STI out there now, so great car.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting little car. No STI that I know of, unless you got some inside information that I need to get my hands on. But so I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what is stunt driving school like?
It's absolutely amazing. For someone who has done autocross, it's the opposite. Like when I started transitioning away from stunts and into racing, it was so difficult. Like I showed up to my first autocross event and I thought I was just gonna wipe the floor with everyone, being a stunt driver, but I actually did very poorly because the two types of driving are very, very different. So at the stunt driving school, we were being taught by, I think there were three guys, Mike Burke, Roy Farfel, and Kevin Rogers. And these guys were at the top of the industry here in the Northeast. They got all the work from the New York film business. They were doing, I think they had just wrapped up the Bourne Ultimatum movie, and, they did Spider-Man, Indiana Jones, and pretty much everything that comes up to the Northeast they do. So these guys are awesome. So basically they rent the end of a runway down in New Jersey, and they have a bunch of old decommissioned police cars, and they just teach you all their tricks. It's amazing. They teach you how to drive backwards at 70 miles an hour. They teach you how to lock up the rear tires and go into a skid and then save it and, park yourself into a box after sliding the car around a really cool bunch of ways. So some of the funnest days I've ever had in my life. But like I said, the market's just flooded now. It's kind of a bummer. But if you ever have some extra money, you'll definitely want to go do that. It is a lot of fun.
I mean, honestly, is it not every little kid's dream to be a stunt driver? I mean,
it was definitely my dream. I know that. I can't imagine anyone wanting to do anything different. I mean, it's just such a blast.
So what is the best stunt that you got to do? What is your favorite stunt you got to do?
Well, let's see. I would have to say, I spent part of a summer on tour with a very old school show that hit all the fairgrounds. They crashed all the cars. They did all kinds of really neat driving stuff, and jumped cars over ramps and stuff like that. So I mean, we wrecked a lot of cars. Like they'd go up on they have the ramp where they'd hit with like two wheels and cut the wheel, and then they'd like flip over 2 or 3 times, and the crowd would just to go totally wild. So that was a really neat thing to catch right on the tail end. There really aren't any shows like that anymore, and it's pretty dangerous the way they used to do it too, and they just kept doing it the same way over and over again all the way through these years. So that was kind of a neat thing to see.
But did you get to was there any close call? Was there ever one that you got out of it and you said I'm never doing that again, or there was one where you got out and you're like, I gotta do that stunt again?
It's really interesting because when you're sitting there about to go do something, you're like, well, this might not be the best idea, but as soon as it starts, you're just in the zone and it's fine, and it feels a little scary, once you start getting into this stuff, but quite honestly, it's relatively safe for the things that you're doing. I mean, they do a pretty good job prepping the cars for the most part, and stunt driving is all about being sideways and smoky, but that kind of thing is very, very slow. So there's not a whole lot of danger in that kind of thing, as opposed to racing where everything is smooth and fast, and it looks a lot more boring than stunt driving. But quite honestly, stunt driving has a lot more prep involved, and it is relatively safe.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I don't know, it just looks so fun to do. I'm sure it was. Let's kind of bring it back to the magazine and the podcast here for a bit. Then, when it comes to the podcast and the magazine working kind of hand in hand, what's the release schedule of the podcast and what's the release schedule of the magazine?
Yeah, so it's changed a few different times based on what's happening, but I think we've settled into a pretty good rhythm now. And right now the podcast is coming out every week on Monday, and that seems to be working really well. The podcast is totally free. It gets several hundred downloads, every day on a good week. And I mean, people waste so much time just commuting. So it's great to be, using your time wisely and learning the art of racecraft instead of listening to music or whatever. So, I'm very pro education. I mean, it's the 98% that isn't driving that's going to help you succeed. And I really do like listening to other car podcasts and guys that are talking shop, and that stuff's fun, and I do enjoy it. But the Racers HQ podcast is much more technical. It's filled with tactical kind of advice and things that you can immediately implement into your racing program. And like I said, I interview a lot of pro drivers, also on the podcast, just like the magazine. So you're sort of getting a feel for the magazine when you listen, except it's the audio version and it's free.
Mm-hmm. And does it work where you'll put out the magazine and there'll be some topics maybe that coincide with what comes out on the podcast coming out, or I don't know, since coordinating a podcast just by itself is such a weird thing. I can't imagine trying to get it to work alongside the magazine. So I'm just wondering what the system is like. Do you have like, here's the topics we're going to talk about the podcast, and here's the topics for the magazine. We're going to like kind of like branch out or expand on this topic since we have opportunity in the podcast, or is it more free-form than that? Is it the magazine's its own kind of self-contained thing, and then the podcast is its own thing, and they just happen to not happen, but they work alongside each other, not necessarily with each other.
Right. They definitely complement each other, and the magazine comes out on every 15th day of the month. So, it is so tricky getting all this stuff organized. Like sometimes I do 7 or 8 interviews in a week. And I think I have a list of people I'm trying to connect with right now, and I think it's like in the mid 40s. I'm always trying to get these people to give me their information, and it works really, really well. So it's definitely a challenge. So sometimes the topics do line up, and it's so tricky because you don't really know what this person's going to say, what they're going to talk about. So it does opportunity for things to go in any direction. And if you're clever and you just kind of let it happen, then the topics kind of write themselves. And you definitely wouldn't want to interview a top level racing driver and say, I need you to talk about this, this, and this. You kind of guide him a little bit, but you let him go. You let him go where the most amount of information he's going to give you is just coming from a natural place from him. So it's just, it's very free form. Sometimes they match, sometimes they don't, but they definitely complement each other, and they definitely spur, follow-ups and different people. I get a lot of people emailing me about the podcast, and they always want to talk more about stuff. So, so when enough people email you, you say, hey, let's do this because people are interested in. So it's extremely fluid.
Mm-hmm. Now, since you talked to Patrick Sandell, did you meet him in person and interview him that way?
No, I haven't met any of these people in person.
No.
It's just it doesn't really make sense to. Everyone is. I mean, these guys are so busy. Like it's almost shocking that they can give me 20 minutes of their time because they have so much going on. So it's far more easy to connect with people, digitally, where you can say, okay, hi, can you connect with me at 10:30 on this particular day or 6 p.m. or you have to work with their media manager or get something like that. So it's very easy for them to pop onto Skype or a quick phone call for 20 minutes, and you just get so much more accomplished that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get lost in Patrick Sandell's eyes. I'm just going to warn you. If you ever meet him in person, like you just get lost inside them. Just warning you. Just I'm a happily married man, but it was like I can see a whole new universe inside Patrick's eyes. No, it's fun, and it's don't know why I have to say that every time someone's had an interaction with him, and a lot of people who've met him in person seem to mirror my sentiments. So just be careful with yourself around him.
Yeah.
All
right.
There's this moment every podcast, just so you know. That's all. We always bring it to a weird point. But you've interviewed so many people, and I'm sure you've had this is the copacetic part of the podcast where I've had it where there's some people where getting information out of them is like pulling, nail or pulling, teeth. And there are some people where you can just be like, hi, how are you? And they'll just kind of like pour their guts out to you. I've had a little bit of experience with racers, and some have been one way and some have been the other. And I don't know, do you kind of have a general feeling about how like the race car community or the race driver community is when it comes to being, are they very chatty Cathy, or are they very more locked in? Or does it depend on the type of racing?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what, it's really easy to figure out before you even talk to anybody. It's really easy to figure out who can give you a good interview and who can't, right? So just a brief browse through their social media platforms and their YouTube videos and their website. That'll tell you everything you need to know about the driver. If there's only two types of drivers. They're the types of drivers who get it and the ones who don't. The ones who get it are extremely social because that's part of their job, right? Their job is to interact with people and create a following, so they can bring their huge social media numbers to the next sponsorship meeting, their sponsorship proposal. So these people are always looking for opportunities, and they love to talk. It's part of their job. The people who don't get it, those are the ones who are going to give the short, half-sentence answers because they don't understand how important it is to keep talking. So anyone who has a strong social media following or presence, or have a great YouTube channel or anything like that, for sure they get it, and they will absolutely love to talk to you for days on end.
Mm-hmm. Now, out of everyone out there in the race community, is there like someone you really want to get that you just haven't been able to yet?
Yes, man, I have so many people on my list. I tell you, I'm working really hard with Roger Penske's media coordinator to get a few minutes of his time, and he is one of the biggest. So I'm probably about 2 months in trying to connect with him, and I will get him eventually. It's just a matter of time, but he will be a massive addition to the magazine once that happens.
Mm-hmm. On the flip side of that, like when you started off doing the magazine, like how long into it? Like, did you start off when you started the website? Were there interviews straight away, or was it kind of your own personal knowledge? And if there were interviews right away, like who was the first person that you got a hold of?
Right, yeah, that's a great question. So when I started the website, I created this really great foundation. It's called the Chalkboard Sessions video playlist, and it's just tons of techniques and concepts like slip angles and percentage of slip and yaw angles and weight distribution and all these great technical physics that you need to understand. So I spent a lot of the time at the beginning just building these free resources so that people would show up to the website. So I didn't even try to get any interviews until about the 1.5 year mark when we started putting the magazine together, because there just wouldn't have been a reason for a pro driver to take time out of his day for me, But now that things are going really, really well, it's really easy to connect with people because, since I spent the time building that following in the very beginning, I can bring those numbers and say, look, these are all, niche followers inside the market that you're trying to reach. So people would love to hear from you. It'd be good for me. It's good for the readers. It's good for you. It's good for your sponsor. So everyone's winning, when these guys connect with me now. So and that was kind of my plan all along. If you want to approach somebody like a big dog, you have to have something to offer. They can't spend their time on you. It's not that they're being jerks. It's just that they don't have a lot of time. So you have to come to the table with something you can give them.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting problem when it comes to people working in a niche outlet like what you do and what I do, which I think people kind of forget about. Like, because when you're in this community and it's your world, you feel like this is something everyone gets. But from the outsider looking in, like there's, when it gets refined down to a point, like you are. There's the way the advertising world looks at it in particular is there's, people who enjoy cars, and then there's people who enjoy racing, and then there's people who enjoy racing cars, and then there's people who want to listen to a podcast about racing or read a magazine about racing. So you start, chopping that all down where, you get to a point where it's a double-edged sword, because the people who really are in that community are really into that community, but on the flip side of that, there's not as many people who do that as there are who just like cars in general. So, I don't know, when you kind of went from stunt driving / racing into this, was that something you kind of understood, or am I just completely talking out my ass right now, or is this more of a problem that you kind of like tackled as you went along?
Yeah, I've learned everything on the fly as I went. I learned how to, manage the website and, build apps and all this other stuff that I never thought I'd be getting into. When you start planning this stuff, you're like, oh, I'm going to just live inside the glories of racing. And then, you're stuck at your computer for the next 8 weeks straight or something like that. But, yeah, marketing is tricky. Marketing is very tricky. But I haven't put a whole lot of time into categorizing all those little sub-niches because they're all so very close, And when I started, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew there were a lot of people out there. So I think that one of the biggest mistakes that small businesses or startups make is they try to please way too many people. Like I like my stuff to be an inch wide and a mile deep, for very specific specific people. There might be a lot less of them, but man, if you can help a lot of those people in that one sub niche, I think there's a lot more potential for return than trying to make everybody happy. Because if you're doing that, you're really just making everyone a little bit happy, But if you really focus on one group, you can make those people absurdly happy.
I think that's what you do really well, and the magazine is so well written, and the podcast, the episodes I've heard. First of all, being able to do the solo podcasting stuff and keep it interesting and compelling like you do, that is one of the hardest things. So I'm very impressed by that. That still makes me super nervous, and I got a ton of those under my belt. You do such a great job, and if you like podcasting, you definitely need to go check out Racers HQ on whatever platform it is you listen to. Where can they find the podcast besides the typical iTunes route?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the thank you for the feedback. That's really great to hear. I appreciate that. So yeah, you can get it. You can get the podcast. It's in several places. You can subscribe to it on iTunes. You can get it through Stitcher. Pretty much any podcasting app that you have, it's on there. If you want to listen to it right on the site, you can too. It's basically just Racers HQ /podcast any number. So it's very easy to find. Just type into the search engine if you're not sure where it is.
And I got to go back because I do the research for these. This is a little bit behind the scenes here. I do the research for these when I reach out to someone, or some cases people reach out to me, and then I got so many to do week by week by week where stuff gets put onto the back burner. And I started doing your episodes, and I had to listen to solo ones first because that's more of that is the essence of you and trying to understand, what's going on. And I got to go back and listen to some interview ones because I'm really fascinated to hear, for those of us who want to go listen, maybe what's a good interview for us to start with on the podcast.
Oh, that is a great question. I think, where do I go with this? I think that the probably one of the best ones is when I interviewed Tim O'Neill, the owner of the Team O'Neill Rally School. And this guy is just a multi-time North American rally champion himself. But the cool thing about him is that he does everything from a very basic level, low funding level. He's very good at giving people information about how to get your racing career going on a very small budget. So that was really helpful. I got a lot of reviews about that one. Also, I had on Ross Bentley of Speed Secrets, and this guy is just the greatest motorsport coach ever. So the Ross Bentley episode, that's episode 16, and the Tim O'Neill episode is episode 24.
And besides the podcast and the magazine, there's still a plethora of free resources available on racershq.com if someone somehow doesn't get enough from the magazine and the podcast. So what are some of the other little quick resources that they can utilize on the site?
Yeah, absolutely. I love free stuff. Like I said, I spent a year putting all this stuff together. There's always more new free stuff going on here, so it's all very helpful. I mentioned earlier there's the Chalkboard Sessions video series. That's all your basics about, the intricacies of race driving. Those are all the conceptual things you need, to have the crust of your pizza or whatever you want to describe it as. So highly recommend that one. I've also got a 52-page guide, which is something I've used several times in my stunt driving world. And as an autocrosser, it's how to approach a local business owner and get them to allow you to use their commercial parking lot for motorsport practice. I've done it a bunch of times, and it's a great way to boost your seat time and test changes on the car if you're an autocrosser, or put together your stunt driving reels like I did. So that's really cool. That's all free. The Chalkboard Sessions is free. There's a lot of great articles on there. There's a really popular article. It's got several thousand views, just that one. It's how to choose the best autocross car, and there's a motorsport tire guide, and there's a huge motorsport fitness section. We have a great sponsorship program. I'm sponsoring 2 autocross racers, and I'm not talking about discounts or anything like that. Like, I give them money to drive for my team. So that's something that people are always interested in. That's all on the homepage at Racers HQ. So tons of free stuff. I just love helping people. Again, if you need something from me, if you're curious, you got a question, you got a problem you can't solve, shoot me an email. Let's chat. Matt at racershq.com. Let's do it.
And is that the best way for them to get a hold of you? Period. If they want to follow you on the social media, is there a place they could go to follow you?
Yeah, my Instagram is going incredibly well. It's grown, I think $9,000 in the past couple months. So I am working on putting together a new free resource about how to boost your if you're an amateur racer or aspiring racer, how to boost your Instagram account by 10,000 followers in 90 days. So that's coming out at some point. But yeah, the email, Matt at racershq.com, that's the best place to reach me. A lot of people like to reach out to me on Instagram, but I mean, I get sometimes I get hundreds of notifications every 2 or 3 minutes. So things happen so quickly and I miss a lot of stuff. So definitely the email is the best way to get a hold of me.
That's a good problem to have, sir.
Yeah, it is.
So if you need to go, if you're listening to my voice, you definitely need to go racershq.com. Matt, there's a series of questions I like to ask here. So I don't know if you've ever seen Inside the Actor's Studio, but he always asks a series of 10 questions to kind of probe the actor, and I like to ask a similar series of questions to probe the driver, car guy, whatever you want to call it, since this is the automotive podcast of record. So
sure. That sounds fun. Let's do it. I love it.
All right, so these are kind of off the cuff, and I after learning from Tavares, we're car guys and gals. This is the answer today, so it can always change, but this is in the moment. So, what is your favorite car?
My favorite car?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I would say it would have to be the Brabus Rocket 900.
That's you have stumped me. I don't know I don't know if that's ever happened in one of these before. Brabus Rocket 9000. I'm gonna have to look that one up real fast. That's interesting. So what's Brabus? So that's Mercedes something?
Yeah, basically they take a Mercedes. It's the AMG Mercedes that they give to the company Black, and then Black soups it up and gives it to Brabus, and then Brabus soups it up even more and puts a ton of really cool kit on it. It's a giant 4-door car. It has 900 horse. It's like the poster on the 5-year-old kid's wall. It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm looking at its picture now. That thing is amazing looking. And I'm not a Mercedes guy. That's pretty good. Okay, so what is your least favorite car?
Oh, wow. Where do I go with this? My least favorite car is definitely the Kia Soul. I'm so sick of the hamsters, man. We got to move on from the hamsters.
It's not the drivers. It's not the car. It's the hamsters.
Yeah.
All right. What modification trend turns you on spiritually, emotionally, or creatively? So that's like stance, brodozer, lifted trucks, eyelashes on cars, truck nuts,
Oh, great question. I think it's got to be like a not I don't know if maybe not quite as crazy as stance, but something you can definitely look at the front end and see a little bit of camber. That's the sweet spot. I can't look away from that.
Now, same question but reverse. What's the modification trend that you can't quite wrap your head around? Not necessarily hate, but the one where you see it on the road and you just can't understand it.
Right. Oh, that one's easy. It's lifted pickup trucks. I'm in the Northeast. We get a lot of snow. I get it. You like your 4-wheel drive, whatever. But here's the thing, okay? Like my brother, and my brother's a great guy, but he bought a $50,000 pickup truck and then lifted it and put massive tires on it. And it's fine. It's fine for what he likes. But I look at it and I go, why did you ruin this truck? It's slower now because you've geared it up. It doesn't turn well anymore because it's 8 feet high. Be like, what happened here? Why did you do this?
Yeah, I don't get it either. I don't think anyone ever will. I think it's a mental problem.
Yeah.
In Ike's America, he would be committed. Um, what is the car you dread to be stuck behind at a red light?
Oh, man. You know what? It used to be the Toyota Prius, but I'm actually sponsoring an autocross racer who drives a Prius, and he wins with it. So I can't really say that anymore. It was just totally mind-blowing when that happened. But I'd say it would probably got to be like it's probably going to be like an early 90s like E350 van, like one of the sketchy ones that has like the clear coat that's lifting off. You're like, what is that guy doing? What is this guy doing? What is he about to do? You know, that's just really sketchy stuff.
You know, it's like I don't want to have to call the cops while I'm driving. This is just going to be terrible. Just
yeah, you got like 911 on standby. You're like, do I need to use this? What's happening?
Was that a little hand in the back? I can't quite tell. What's going on?
Yeah.
What automotive noise or sound do you love?
Oh man. Oh, I don't even. Okay. Man, I can make a list of like 50 right now, but one of the ones that's always very close to the top is the original Audi Quattro World Rallycross car. That thing is just heaven.
I can hear it now. I don't know, the 5 cylinders. They sound best.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It just sounds like a symphony. You just know it.
What automotive sound or noise do you hate?
Oh, it's those $10 mufflers that you get from like AutoZone or something like that. Oh, come on, man! You're not. I mean, you got to take the original muffler off first. I mean, holy cow! They just sound awful. They just sound like someone's shaking a tin can with a bunch of acorns in it or something. It's horrible.
It does sound like the car is just rattling apart on its own. What?
Yeah.
What profession in the automotive world, besides doing what you're doing, would you most want to try?
Ooh, man, you got all these great questions online. This is awesome. I'm thinking. I think I would love to be one of those guys who goes out on the runways, when the weather's kind of dicey, and they drive up to like 100 miles an hour and then slam on the brakes, and they get to see how sketchy the runway is, and that's the guy who makes the decision whether the planes can fly or not. I want to try that. That sounds cool.
This is the first I've ever heard of this job, and now I want this job. Thanks a lot. That sounds awesome.
Exactly.
Like, I just move. That'd be perfect. I could go back to Chicago O'Hare, and I can drive on the runway real fast. What profession in the automotive world would you least want to try?
I never, ever want to be one of those lube tech guys who has to hang out in the basement and change the hot oil.
It's basically a dungeon, right? Like, that's where you, like, if this was medieval times, that would be a dungeon, and they would talk about, like, the way they used to torture people down there, because it looks like a dungeon every time I go to one of those, which is not often, thankfully.
Yeah, yeah, it's like auto mechanic prison. It does not look like a fun place to be.
No, it is awful. What is your automotive pet peeve?
My automotive pet peeve. People who are terrible at driving sticks, and this is the biggest problem because I interact with a lot of new drivers. Okay, even just down the road, when the people go to shift, they just instantly let the clutch out. I'm like, dude, can't you feel the car lurching? Use your brain for just a second. Think about what you're doing. Just wait another half second and then let the clutch out. Let the revs come back down to where they're going to be and then let it out. And then people do it and they're like, oh yeah, that works. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, it's, as someone who within the last 5 years learned to drive stick, it is amazing to me that is not, it's not counterintuitive, but it's one of those things where you want to get cocky fast, and the moment you get cocky, you're like, oh, I can drive stick, you end up burning out some clutches.
Oh yeah, you'll stall it all over the place in front of your friends. It's not good.
No. All right, now this is probably the most important question. We always ask this of our guest. Probably the most important question ever asked in the automotive world, and I hope you got a great answer for it. It was in our prepared section. So,
all right, I'm ready.
What is the hardest food to eat while driving?
Oh, that's easy. It's authentic ramen noodles from a legit Asian restaurant. That stuff is hard enough to eat at a table with 2 chopsticks, man. You would never be able to get it anywhere near your mouth without burning yourself or ruining your entire car.
The chopsticks do add another level of stress to that. That's good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Soup, I always feel like if you can drink in a car, you can drive the car. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's fairly good. Because, again, this section typically turns into stupid shit Ike's done into car. But we've had some answers recently where I have not eaten X food in the car, and this is one of them. So I'm going to have to try that. So that was up there. That's up there with the matzo ball soup for stuff I have not eaten in a car, but now need to try to prove that it can be done.
Well, you go ahead and do that, and then you email me and let me know how it went. Take some pictures.
Well, hopefully it won't be a crash scene. So,
yeah.
Matt Covert, it has been an absolute delight to have you on today. Let's plug the website, the podcast, and your social media one more time before we go.
Sure, thank you very much. Yes, you can download the Racers HQ Magazine app for free on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Get your first issue free, no problems there. The podcast you can find at racershq.com. That is free, along with a ton of other free resources right on the homepage. Follow me on Instagram at racershq. I'd love to see you there. Shoot me an email, matt at racershq.com. What are you doing? What do you got going on? Let's talk.
It's because I like that little thing. What are you doing? What do you got going on? Come on, let's talk. It's been an absolute delight, Matt. I'm going to say goodbye to you off air. Everyone who's listening, I'll be right back. Woo-doo-doo. All right, everyone. If you enjoyed what you heard this evening, make sure you go check out racershq.com. Make sure you check out the UntitledCarShow.com. That's where we put up all our articles and all the interesting stuff over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Untitled Car Show. You can follow me on Facebook at Untitled Car Show, I think is how you do it on Facebook. I don't know Facebook very well, so that's how that works. So, yeah, just Google Untitled Car Show on Facebook or whatever it is you do on Facebook. There's an Instagram account. Not great at that, but follow along there. I'm trying to work on that. You can follow the West Coast correspondent, Ryan West, on Twitter at Ryanator122. And you can tell a friend about the show because that's what really helps us grow here as a community. So thanks again, everyone, so much for listening. Have a good night. Have a good evening, wherever you are, whatever time it is there. Thank you so much for listening. Please be safe out there.